It's been a year since I've been living in Paris, and I really don't know how to feel about it because a year feels right because it feels like I've been here for a year, but it also feels like I've been here for 3 years. But then in the same breath, it feels like I just got here. So I think a year in Paris is really, it's a milestone, it's a hurdle that I'm grateful that I kind of like jumped over. But now that I'm here at the year mark, I feel like there's a lot of reflecting that I've been able to do. Um, it has been a wild year. I feel like a lot has happened since I moved here. I've changed a lot as a person. I feel like when I look at myself in the mirror, I was talking to my friend the other day over drinks about this. It's like when I look in the mirror, I don't recognize myself from the point that I got here anymore. And I haven't really tried to investigate if that's a good thing or a bad thing yet. I kind of just accept it because part of moving abroad and living abroad in a completely different country is you get to learn more about yourself. You get to lose yourself and find yourself again. And that might happen multiple times within your first year. I think I'm very grateful for the experience I've had since living here in Paris. I mean, when I was living in Italy for nearly 3 years before I moved here, I feel like I went through so many ups and downs. I remember I would scroll on TikTok and just my whole For You page was people talking about Dark Night of the Soul. I don't know if you've heard of this, but it's basically when you have like an ego death and you go through situations that are so difficult for you to process that it kind of feels like your life is just crumbling. But when you rebuild yourself up by yourself from like you piece yourself back together and you end up on the other side, that's when you realize how much growth you've obtained. So Dark Night of the Soul was actually a good thing for me, even though there were a lot of ups and downs of living in Italy. I also feel like though living in Italy is very different than America. It's almost opposite. I would even say Paris is the same. I remember the first time I moved to Paris, or visited Paris, was for a couple of weeks in 2020. I was here for Fashion Week. I was assisting a couple of designers with showroom and working a lot with models backstage and things like this. But anyways, it was such an incredible experience and I loved it so, so, so much. And then fast forward about 4 years, I moved to Paris for the first time ever, where I had my own apartment. I was really living here. And I just remember, I think I slept for the first 2 weeks and I didn't know what was wrong with me. And it was such a weird experience because when I had moved to Florence, I think I was mostly just so excited to like live abroad that my first month was kind of a blur. Like I remember just getting to know my classmates and being really inspired and kind of doing everything that you can in that first month of living in a foreign country that's like so exciting. Also, sorry, I'm doing laundry if you can hear it. But when I moved to Paris, it was different because I had already been through that hurdle of living abroad twice. I lived in London as well a few years ago. So I wasn't so much excited. I was more curious. But I think because that excitement of like living abroad for the first or second time wasn't there anymore, I was experiencing it was just culture shock after culture shock after culture shock, like flooded apartment and just weird things happening, like in the first month or so of my time in Paris. So I remember I was talking to a few of my friends here in Paris about this when I got here. It's called Paris syndrome, and it's something that a lot of people experience. It's where you have this kind of vision of Paris and you think it will just be beautiful and as it's portrayed in films, and then you get here and it's kind of like you see all the cracks like you would in any country, but you see the cracks and it's kind of like this beautiful ideal vision of Paris that you have in your head is not what it is when you live here. So I kind of attest to that. When I was here just visiting years ago, it was like everything was perfect. But when I moved here, that's when you start to see how it can be very difficult. there's so many processes, such as finding an apartment and navigating through the friend spaces in Paris and finding your fit. There's many things that kind of were quite difficult for me to navigate at the beginning, but I was lucky that I was very busy and distracted by work and things like this, so I didn't really focus on them. But after sleeping for the first couple weeks, I knew something was up. But I've been through a few of these experiences here in Paris. It's almost like every few months, I would say, I felt like a little dip, and that's when I start to sleep more and I want to spend more time at home and I'm more like in my own thoughts. And I think that's also just part of living abroad as a younger person, or I mean, I guess for anyone, but when you're younger, I think you're still trying to like find your place in the world and find your footing and find your friend group and things like this. So like when you move abroad to another country and you kind of have to like start over, it can be very scary. And that's kind of like what I have gone through a bit. But fast forward to now. It's been over a year, and I can say that I feel like I've gone through something that I haven't gone through in a while, and it's where I've been so busy, just in a way, kind of distracted by work and projects and things like this, that I haven't really focused so much on friend groups or trying to fit in or these kind of more superficial but also kind of needed things in life. Um, because I've really just been so busy this year. I feel like this year I've been the most busy I've been since like 2022. And in a way, it's such a blessing because living in Paris is quite difficult. I've heard from many people as well that they kind of feel like they've gone through these like high highs and low lows in Paris. So because I've been so busy, I've kind of like avoided this. But it wasn't really up until the year mark started approaching where I started to really miss home. And I feel like I've done a lot in Paris, but I've also not done a lot at the same time because I've been so busy with work and things. But I've experienced like La Fête de la Musique and I've experienced Paris Disneyland and a lot of other cultural things that happen, like the Fireman's Ball. I experienced that. That was so funny and so fun. Um, but aside from that, I've really kind of focused inwards and just spent a lot of my time focusing on more so my career and myself than I have on external relationships and things like this. But one thing that I've learned as I've grown in Paris and as the time has gone on is that patience is the best thing that you can hold on to, especially when number one, you're living abroad, but number two, you're really busy and wraps up in whatever projects or work you're focused on. I think for me right now, I'm just trying to focus a lot on just keeping my attention on work, where those external relationships and friends and partners and all of this, it will come when the timing is right. And that's something that I think when I was a bit younger, I used to try to rush. I used to feel like the only way for these things to kind of come in is if you put effort in, which is also true. But there is something to be said about if you're on the right path and you're focused on yourself and your career and really just building yourself personally. I think over time, these other things that we might want at the time, but we're too busy for, will come in naturally and it will be so much better and the relationships will be so much stronger. Another thing that I've learned since being here around the year mark as well has been that family is so important. I've always known this, but I think it being my third country that I've lived in abroad and it being Paris, which can be very difficult to live abroad for the first time in, um, I've really started to focus more on family and kind of like maintaining those connections that I have with them because I think having been abroad off and on since 2020, I'm realizing that like these relationships are fleeting. Time is time is genuinely the essence, and it goes by so quick. And I can't even, it's crazy that I first moved abroad 5 years ago because looking back, it's like that's actually a long time. So many things have happened. Like my all of my family are 5 years older. I'm 5 years older. Time is just like goes by so quick. So in a way, it's kind of beautiful because I've learned this at like a younger age that family is so incredibly important. I know everyone has like different family relationships, but for me, I really have been focusing more on this lately, and I've been really eager and excited to go home when I can and to experience my breaks at home. Another funny thing, I saw a video the other day because lately I've been in my feels a bit about my hometown. And there was someone who was talking about the same thing. She's also living in Paris. I'll have to find her account. I really don't remember what it was. But she was saying how she felt kind of the same way that I have recently, where your family is one of the most important things out there, but it takes to moving abroad to kind of realize that the connection is so important. And it's something that kind of like changed her perception on life and all of this, but it took moving to Paris to kind of like realize that those connections are so incredibly important, more so than she already knew. Um, so yeah, my mind's kind of been on this lately. But aside from that, living abroad in Paris is it's different than living abroad anywhere else, of course, but it's something where I'm so grateful that I've had this experience to, be abroad here and go through these hurdles because I can already see when I look in the mirror that I'm a much different person than I was when I got here. And these like trials and tribulations have just made me stronger and more focused on the future than I ever was before. Um, and I think it's just important. Like if you've been through your first year as well, or you're like just moved to Paris or you just moved abroad, to focus on the present and a little bit on the future. I know it can be tricky because I know you're not supposed to focus too much on the future because it can cause anxiety and these kind of things if you're not focused in the present. But it's really important to focus on doing what you can now that will best serve you in the future. So when I do feel a bit down sometimes about, um, you know, not maybe living the normal life of like a 20-year-old and like not having these relation or 20 something year old not having these relationships that I see a lot of my peers having and things like this. I really try to focus inward and think of my future and be like, okay, this time period that I'm in right now will pay off so much, and that's something that I can feel for a fact. So yeah, I it's about 4 in Paris right now, so I'm gonna spend my Sunday just I don't know why it always does this. I'm gonna spend my Sunday doing what I normally do of just cleaning, doing some cooking. I'm doing laundry at the moment. I think I'm gonna journal a bit and do a little bit of crafts. So yeah, I will talk to you all soon. I hope that if you're going through something tricky, on your time living abroad, that you understand that you're not alone and that I've definitely been through that feeling. I'm kind of going through it now, but it's a lot of ups and downs. But in the end, if you're following your heart, it will pay off. So I will talk to you all soon. Ciao, ciao.